addressing atheists, you say you're simply not an atheist in your actions, and it is your actions.
Or if you are, look out.
And it is your actions that most accurately reflect your religious beliefs. What do you mean by that? Why are you saying that no one is really an atheist deep down?
I didn't say no one was.
Okay.
I said that most of the people who claim to be atheists aren't. So this is why I like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, because Raskolnikov tried to act like an atheist, right? He took the ideas that were floating around, Dostoevsky took the ideas that were floating around in the late 1800s, which are still the ideas that we're discussing today. One most fundamental idea, I suppose, being after Nietzsche's announcement of the death of God, that if there is no God, then anything is permitted. That was Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov's the criminal in Crime and Punishment, the murderer. He gets away with his murder, technically, but not psychologically. And he decides that if there's no God, anything is permitted.
But
and
this
he can't
doesn't
see
have
a
to
reason.
be true. That's a person in a character in a novel. I don't think that that's so.
Well, let's hear the end of that story. And what do you take away from what Dostoevsky has to say about?
Well, Dostoevsky's takeaway was that there was a moral law that Raskolnikov was breaking, even though he rationalized his way through it. Like, he committed the perfect murder, right? He murdered a woman who people would have voted to murder, and then he got away with it. And he did it for good reasons, at least reasons that he could rationalize as good. And then he got away with it, but it destroyed his soul. And Dostoevsky's right about that. And one of the things I like about Dostoevsky as compared to Nietzsche, say, because I think Dostoevsky is the profounder of the two, is that in The Brothers Karamazov, for example, Ivan is the atheist, and Ivan is everything you'd want a man to be, like, seriously. And Dostoevsky, man, he doesn't straw man his opponents. The most powerful characters in his books are always the opponents of what he himself believes. And Ivan is always arguing with Alyosha, who's his younger brother, who's a monastic novitiate and really can't articulate himself very well, has nowhere near the force or charisma of Ivan. But Alyosha wins the drama, even though he loses all the arguments. And that's where Dostoevsky is so great. It's like, and this is what you're doing in your life. You're acting out the logos, Susan. That's what you're doing. You're writing books to illuminate the world.
Yes.
You say,
And
well, I
that's
don't
not
believe
coming
in
from
that.
a place
Yes, you
of
do.
meaninglessness.
Don't you think it's kind of offensive to say to me that I'm not an atheist when I am? Why don't answer me this question? Why do you think I don't go around murdering people? Why do you think I go around trying to be?
I don't know you well enough to know.
Yes, I could have done something.
I think often the reason that people don't do it is because they're too cowardly.
Oh, that could be a reason. It could be that I don't murder people. I'd really
No,
love
I'm not
to.
necessarily saying you.
No, it's
well,
a possible one.
It's
All
in
right,
fact
all right.
highly likely at
Yes.
some times in your life
But
if you're a
it's
normal
very-
person. So you can think about Christ from a psychological perspective, and the critic, my critic, this particular critic that I've been reading, said, well, that doesn't differentiate Christ much from a whole sequence of dying and resurrecting mythological gods. And of course, people have made that claim in comparative religion. Joseph Campbell did that, and Jung to a lesser degree, I would say, but Campbell did that. But the difference, and C.S. Lewis pointed this out as well, the difference between those mythological gods and Christ was that there's a historical representation of his existence as well. Now, you can debate whether or not that's genuine. You can debate about whether or not he actually lived and whether there's credible objective evidence for that, but it doesn't matter in some sense because it does, but there's a sense in which it doesn't matter because there's still a historical story. And so what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief and I don't understand it. Because I've seen sometimes the objective world and the narrative world touch. That's Jungian synchronicity. Yeah. And I've seen that many times in my own life. And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. We have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. We treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know that seems to me oddly plausible.
Yeah.
But I still don't know what to make of it. Partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
If you believed in the story of Christ, or if you believed that history and let's say the narrative meet, let's
both,
say.
I think you, because when you believe that, you buy both those stories. You believe that the narrative and the objective can actually touch. The fact that that's the case. The Pharaoh is tortured by God. Well, what's God? Well, we said already, at least to some degree, God is the amalgamation of all that is good. I'm not speaking religiously when I say that. I'm speaking conceptually.
Okay.
God is the union of all things that are good. Okay, but that's not conceptual exactly, because that's also something that you exist in a relationship to and that you act out. It's not just an idea. Okay, so God is that spirit that calls to Abraham to have the adventure of his life instead of languishing in his father's tent. So it's called to adventure. It's truth. It's the burning bush. It's the psychedelic experience. It's God against the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh is a totalitarian, and he keeps imposing his edicts, running contrary to freedom, promoting slavery, let's say. Well, the kingdom fractures and crumbles continually. And you might say, well, time frame's a problem, man. Maybe you can be a successful tyrant even over the course of your lifetime. But maybe you doom your country to death. You doom your country to hell. Is that success? It depends on what you mean success is, because these things do depend on definitions.
But all countries collapse. All of them. Every civilization that has ever existed has fallen apart.
No, I don't think so.
Which one's still around?
Ours?
Yeah, but we haven't been around that long.
I don't know. You can trace
We're falling apart right now.
You know this, Joe. You can trace the religious experience, the religious revelation, the central religious revelation, back at least 25,000 years of continued transmission.
25,000? Really?
Sure. All the way back to the Stone Age shaman. For sure. For sure.
Is that 100% proven that they were experiencing altered states of consciousness and that they were imparting these lessons in a form of a religion?
100%'s a lot.
Okay. For certain?
I think I can only say what I've concluded by looking in as many places I could possibly look, ranging from the theological through the literary, through history, through the scientific, the biochemical, all of that, trying to stack all that up. So it's multiple, it's called a multi-method, multi-trait construct analysis. The idea is if something's true, it will manifest itself in multiple different places with independent methodologies. So it's like your senses do that. Is this real? Well, I can see it, I can hear it, I can touch it, I can taste it. 5 things say it's real. Is this cup there, Joe? Yes. Okay, now you said it's real too. Okay, real. Now, is that finally real? No. But that's a different question. It's real enough for the purposes. Same thing here. I think the idea that, like Jack and the Beanstalk, the magic beans, climbing up the magic stalk to heaven, that's a shamanic tale. We know some fairy tales are 15,000 years old. That one's 100,000 years old.
Is it really?
We don't know.
Right. It's
but
hard
that
to
story,
quantify.
like Mircea Eliade wrote a book called Shamanism. He's a great historian of religions. And he looked at the commonality of shamanic experience across multiple cultures. It's very stable. He thought that psychedelic-induced shamanic practices were a corruption of the original tradition. I don't think that's right. I think it's wrong.
We had a conversation before the podcast started about Brian Murarescu's work and The Immortality Key, which is an amazing book. And I was, we were talking about that sort of field of study that has emerged in Harvard now because of Brian's work, and that they're now
and Ruck, right?
Yes,
and Gordon Wasson, and all
Gordon
these
Wasson
crazy
from
bastards,
Mexico from the 50s, right? It was Life magazine.
Hey, let's
who wrote
discover
about that.
psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah.
Oops.
That is now being really. It's not fringe anymore. then what
yeah, it
the
still is.
It is sort of, but
yeah, wait till it's not, man.
yeah, well, it is right, and
Yeah.
that there's a lot of people that still aren't aware, but at
Yeah.
least in academia, and at least in Harvard, it's now being pursued.
Roland
with
Griffith's work
sincerity.
has helped that a lot too.
Yeah.
The work he's done with psilocybin in the lab, which is like really solid scientifically.
That's John
Yeah,
Hopkins, right?
Yeah, that's and also who did the DMT work? Rick Strassman.
Yes.
Poor Rick.
I
It's
love
like,
that guy.
Yeah, he had to stop doing it. Really, it's like, look what's happening.
What do
All
you
these
mean?
people get shot out. Well, he didn't know what to do with it. He's a really traditional biological, psychological researcher. And he said, well, we'll measure people's heart rate and we'll check their psychophysiological responses and, we'll see what this DMT does. It's like, and then all these people came back from the experience and said, hey, I got shot right out of my body and I went into a domain where I met alien beings. It's like, you were dreaming. No, you don't understand. I've dreamt before.
Yeah.
And this was not only real, it was the most real thing I've ever experienced. He said, well, that's a Jungian archetype. He said, well, no, you don't get it. It was more real than reality itself. And every single person came back and said that. And so I read The Spirit Molecule, which is a very interesting book. And by the end of it, Strassman he kind of got shell-shocked like our whole culture did when it discovered LSD. It's like,
Well, he had to be very careful in his depictions too, because he can't talk about personal experiences because he wants to be taken seriously as a, as an actual researcher.
And good